Joining us right now, GOP political strategist, co-founder of MustReadTexas.com, Matt Mackowiak. Matt, good morning. How are you?
Hey, Chad. Good morning. I'm doing great. How about you?
Doing great. Appreciate you taking some time today to join us. Let's talk about the news that came out on Friday that Governor Perry, or former Governor Perry, will be in Dallas on June 4th to announce his presidential campaign. Not shocking that he's running, of course. He's been preparing for this for about a year or so. He's a long shot. He's an underdog right now. What kind of chances do you think he has of rising to a top-tier status?
Yeah, it's a good question because, I can sort of really see two scenarios. I can see very clearly, one scenario where he just sort of doggedly works Iowa and does, dozens and hundreds of events across the 99 counties in Iowa. And uses his retail skills and his knowledge of agriculture and his military experience and obviously the experience of running the Texas economy to great effect, and kind of overperforms and finishes perhaps in the top three in Iowa and surprises a lot of people. Now, in order for that to happen, he obviously would have to perform well in the debates and put a lot of those questions away. Now, there's another scenario where you can imagine him not getting any traction or perhaps having a mistake in the debates that reinforces the narrative about him that's already there. So it's going to, to me, he's one of the candidates where I think there's the greatest range of possibilities. I think there's a chance he could be one of the two or three final candidates in the race, but I also think he could finish, sixth in Iowa and have no path forward after Iowa.
There was a story with the Texas Tribune over the weekend discussing that Abbott could be a kingmaker when it comes to the March 1st primary in Texas. I personally, I don't expect Abbott to really, depending on who's in the race, of course, I don't see him endorsing a Cruz over Rick Perry or Rick Perry over Cruz. What role do you think Abbott would even want to play in 2016 when the primary moves towards Texas?
Yeah, what he's said so far is he's laid out some very specific criteria, and I think that, forget if it's in that Texas Tribune piece, but I know it's also been reported a piece in the National Review online about the things he's looking for, which is someone who supports turning Medicaid into a block grant for the state, someone who wants to limit or perhaps get rid of the EPA and the Department of Education, someone who's going to follow the Constitution, someone who's a conservative. So those are the criteria he's looking for. What's interesting, Chad, is that Texas is obviously very early this time. I think it's going to be the fifth state to vote after Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina being the first four. Texas is on March 1st, and that Tuesday you're going to have 6 or 8 other southern states, but Texas is by far the biggest state, and about 3/4 of our delegates are going to be awarded in sort of a winner-take-all by congressional district fashion. So, look, think of it this way. If Perry and Cruz are both still viable candidates by then, they're going to be competing very strong and likely finish, first and second in Texas. But there's a scenario where one of those two is not still viable, and perhaps even both are not still viable.
Right.
So, to me, Texas is very interesting, but we're not going to know who still, has resources and who's still a viable candidate until probably after South Carolina, and that's going to impact, whether Texas has a role in determining who the nominee is. I would agree. I think Abbott would be unlikely to favor one over the other, unless one is a lot stronger than the other. But what's more interesting to me is who would he support if neither of them were still viable candidates. That, to me, is very interesting. He has said that he wants to take all the Republican presidential candidates down to the southern border, to tour the border firsthand to see it. And he's done that for Scott Walker, who agreed to do it before he spoke in Houston at a Reagan Day dinner 6 or so weeks ago. And I think he'll probably start taking other candidates down there as well.
Do you think Abbott has to worry about even his own political future when it comes to endorsing or not endorsing a candidate in 2016? There's already chatter that maybe in the future he may be challenged by Dan Patrick at some point for the governor's mansion. So does Abbott have to weigh that in to any kind of 2016 decision?
Well, look, you never want to be governor of your home state and endorse a candidate who doesn't win a statewide race in your home state, right? because it sort of reflects on your political power in a negative way. So I think he will be probably pretty cautious and pretty careful about it. I still think we're likely to have 4, 5, 6, viable candidates by the time Texas comes around. And so, again, it depends a lot on whether those Texans are still active. I think the safest political decision for him is probably to support Cruz, to endorse Cruz. Cruz is likely, I think, to win Texas if he's still viable. Whether you like him or not, he's got a lot of support, I think, among Republican primary voters in Texas, and has shown that. So, but yeah, all this talk about, somebody primarying Abbott next time, I think is way overblown. Abbott's going to have $15 or $20 million in the bank, huge name ID, lots of successes, and he remains very, very, very strong among the grassroots in the Republican Party. So you should consider those kinds of things, but I don't think it's a big issue.
One more 2016 question for you. Why would Lindsey Graham run for president?
The primary reason he's running is he wants to be sort of the chief attack dog on the foreign policy views of Rand Paul. And he's made that pretty clear. He wants to run against isolationism and sort of weak foreign policy. And I don't know that he feels confident that a lot of the other candidates are going to explicitly do that. Look, he's a native son from South Carolina. You would presume he would be in a strong position to do well in his home state, although the polling hasn't shown that so far. But look, I tend to agree with you. I don't think there's a path to nomination for him. He obviously has big problems with the base when it comes to immigration, as someone who supported the Gang of Eight bill and really supports a path to citizenship more broadly. He's a moderate Republican at a time when moderates are not where the enthusiasm is among our base. And so, yeah, I think it's a little bit of a vanity effort. I don't see much of a path there.
Looking at the legislature, about 14 days left down in Austin. There was an article that came out. I can't remember if it came out in the San Antonio Express News or where it came out, but the headline was "Everyone is winning." Right now it's this has been an everyone wins type of legislature as far as the House goes, as far as the Senate goes, and as far as Abbott goes. Would you agree with that? And do you think we're going to get everything done as far as a budget and the important bills that Abbott wants and not go into a special session?
I think we are going to avoid a special session. It sounds like the House and Senate are fairly close to resolving a lot of the major issues, including the tax cut issue, which is preventing the budget from being finalized. We'll see whether they end up going with Patrick's a property tax cut versus technically homestead exemption increase, but it's essentially a property tax cut, or the House version of the sales tax reduction. I think they're likely to go more in Patrick's direction, actually, which surprises me. A month ago, I would have thought that the business groups would have succeeded in making the case for the sales tax. But I think people are so frustrated about property tax increases because of appraisals in suburban areas and urban areas across the state. I think that they really feel like they have to address that. But yeah, there are some disappointments. Looks like campus carry is not going to happen. School choice definitely not going to happen. Some of these immigration enforcement bills appear unlikely. So I think conservatives will have a wish list of things that don't get done. But look, it's going to be a concession for Abbott. Abbott's going to get all of his emergency items, all those major priorities addressed. He's going to come out of this being able to say that the legislature accomplished everything he asked them to do. And that's, I think, going to give him real momentum. But yes, the House and Senate both will have to have things that they're proud of, and everybody have something they can campaign on for re-election.
Well, and you bring up something really, really good there with school choice and with campus carry. Who gets the blame on that? Or are we going to see this summer and moving forward, Senate and House leaders blaming each other over what did not get covered that conservative voters wanted?
Oh, no, I think it's very clear the House will get the blame for not passing those two things. The House leadership doesn't support school choice. That's true of the Speaker of the House. It's true of the House Education Committee chairman. Until you have a change in, I think, those two positions, you're unlikely, I think, to pass meaningful school choice. Campus carry, there's a little bit more of a split view on that. You have, the chancellors of Texas and Texas A&M both oppose it. That gives, I think, some of our Republican members some pause. So, look, I think a lot of this, these items, passed the Senate and didn't pass the House, and they would have become law. I think the governor would have signed both. So, you're going to see, continued efforts to try to make the House more conservative through the primaries next year, and we'll see whether they, are able to basically defeat a number of more moderate members in primaries.
Matt, what can people find on your website, mustreadtexas.com?
Yeah, 2 weeks left. Obviously covering the legislative session and all the remaining issues. And there was also a story from the Washington Post about a conservative evangelical leader named Paul Pressler, a former appellate judge in Houston who endorsed Ted Cruz over the weekend at a conference in Virginia. So lots of news, all the opinion, all the blog items. You can find it all at mustreadtexas.com.
All right, Matt, as always, thank you very much.
Have a great week.
You too. We'll go ahead. We'll take the break. We'll be right back on the Chad Hasty Show.